It could destroy human society as we know it if you don't get it right.
You don't want machines that take over decisions or even influence the development of our society.
We do not want to become slaves of the technology we are creating.
Humans have been augmenting their bodies for thousands of years. But right now, across the world, scientists are working on even more incredible improvements to our bodies.
Imagine that we have a brain-computer interface device that hooks right into your brain and then it connects to an app on your phone.
Perhaps one of the biggest fears people have about the idea of implanting a computer in the brain is that their brain might get hacked. So someone might influence your brain. But what if they could subtly influence your perception of an event? Or even at a more basic level, your enjoyment?
The challenge is to somehow augment ourselves, but in a way that we preserve our humanness. And so what it comes down to is what are some of the crucial features of humanity that we want to preserve?
What happens if we don't augment people in working memory from being a 7 to an 8, but instead we augment them from being a 7 to a 20? There are no 20s. We don't really know what that would be like.
Cats can see just as well as we can during the day, but they can see 7 times better than we can at night. And the reason they can do this is genetics, right? They have the genetics for night vision. So if there's a way to augment ourselves, to give ourselves night vision, where we can see just as well during the day, but we can see 7 times better at night, imagine the global energy consumption, how much we can reduce that.
But what could that mean for our future?
We're staring at a world in which we will fundamentally change the definition of what it means to be human.
It's going to be a really interesting time to discover what it really means to be human and what are the ethics of it. And I will be honest, I'm uncomfortable with the thoughts of it.
Hello and welcome to the 2020 edition of Kaspersky NEXT. We have so much to talk about today. I'm delighted to be here with you as we explore some of the biggest issues looking ahead to the future of cybersecurity, IT and technology. And we are thrilled to bring together experts and the media to discuss the latest findings and debate the most relevant technology topics for today and tomorrow. So let's cover a few housekeeping bits first of all. If you have any questions, please type them into the question field on the viewing screen and we'll endeavour to answer them at the end of each session. Any questions we can't answer, we're going to get to hopefully by the end of today. If not, we will reply to you in writing after the event. Now, just to recap, this is what the agenda looks like for this afternoon. Coming up, we have a talk exploring the latest in human augmentation, and that'll set us up nicely for the big debate on the topic. And of course, after that, we've got a short comfort break before we'll talk about the current state of the Cerberus threat, and we'll be finishing the day with a fascinating fireside chat with someone on the front lines of the COVID fight, cybersecurity style. So we are about to take a deep dive into the world of human augmentation. That term might make you think about cyborgs or even Steve Austin, the Bionic Man, remember him? But in truth, it's an area of technological innovation that's already been part of our lives. Whether it's contact lenses, hearing aids or pacemakers, we humans have been adding tech to our bodies for many years. As we look to the future, this is set to have an even more dramatic impact on our lives. To introduce the topic of augmentation and what it means for humanity and our future, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you Marco Preuss and David Jacoby, and they are from Kaspersky's Global Research and Analysis team. Now, since the beginning, humans have experimented with the tools and new methods to augment their lives, from simple stone and flint tools to hearing aids and the recent strength-enhancing exoskeletons used in the Seat car factory in Spain. Human augmentation plays a huge part in our lives already, in our shared history and in our future. And COVID-19 has fundamentally changed our societies. And consequently, we're more aware than ever of the limitations of our bodies. Not only will we need to think more creatively about how we protect one another, but also how we can become more resilient to threats to our own well-being. Well, today we will talk you through all of those areas of innovation that might one day have an answer to those questions. Human augmentation, the process of augmenting or improving the human body with the aid of technology to make it better than it already was. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you properly to the two gentlemen to my left now. We've got Marco and David. Welcome to you both. David, please tell us who you are.
So thank you very much. I am David Jacoby. I am head of security research in the North Europe region, and the company is basically the security evangelist. I've been working for Kaspersky for over 10 years. And in the industry, doing penetration tests and vulnerability research for over 25 years.
Marco, please.
Hey, I'm Marco. I'm with Kaspersky for about 16 years already. And I'm heading the European division of GREAT. I'm very interested in our future tech, of course. That's why augmentation is very interesting for me, but all kind of different new technologies and also the privacy and security aspects of them.
So David, can I hand over to you and go ahead and talk to us about human augmentation?
Thank you very much. So, yeah, when we talked about doing this presentation, we didn't really know what to say. I mean, should we be the people who tell everybody that human augmentation is a big problem, that we should stay away from it, that we'll see cyber criminals hack human bodies in the future, or what are we actually going to see? But we decided to look into what is actually human augmentation. So in the next few slides, we'll try to cover a few points what we consider as human augmentation. So let's start with the military. And why we start with the military is there's actually two different things that we should discuss here. So the military, for me, is working on creating universal soldiers. I mean, I'm born in the 1980s, and I've seen the movie Universal Soldiers, and I've been brought up with movies with RoboCop and stuff like that. But I mean, are we actually going to save lives by enhancing humans to become better at fighting and killing? I don't really know if that is the case. I personally think that war is wrong. So with that said, I'm actually going to not discuss military or weapon or body enhancement that will make sure that someone can kill someone else. I want to stay on a positive note when it comes to human augmentation.
We probably will see a lot of first adoptions in this technology.
Yeah, and with that said, Marco, that we'll see a lot of new adoption. Let's talk about what we already have, because as you mentioned in the intro video, we've been augmenting our bodies for a very long time. We, for example, have the medtech industry, which has been enhancing, bodies with not just with technology, but with silicone as well. I mean, we've seen this, breast implants and so on, but we also see, pacemakers and hearing aids and insulin pumps and, those different things. But I mean, if we look into the future and we talk about medtech, is medtech something that's only for the rich, or are we going to see, technical devices that's going to save lives in Africa, for example, or is that only something that we will have in the Western countries?
I think that's quite an interesting topic because what we usually see with new technologies, at first is just available to some elite group, like rich, powerful, whatsoever, till it's like distributed down the pyramid, basically. That's like a kind of natural evolution, what we've seen with a lot of huge groundbreaking technologies in the past. And I think especially in the medical sector, this is quite interesting because I guess it's also a lot of fear in that it's first only available to certain groups. rather than for the whole society, which of course will cause a lot of problem on a lot of different levels. So that's definitely an area where we have to look very close into, not only from a technology perspective, but also from political society perspective point of view.
I mean, one other interesting point when it comes to medtech is that when you have this different, if you divide society into the rich and the poor, I mean, we've seen this in the beauty industry as well, where you have all these copycats creating, fake Rolex watches and fake branded stuff. Are we going to see the same thing with medtech, that we're going to see biohacked or homemade or even fake, pacemakers or hearing aids or something? Are we going to see an entire big black market grow with medtech?
I think that's a quite likely scenario, to be honest, especially because in the beginning, due to the costs of these kind of devices, we have similar scenarios already nowadays with our technologies. I mean, you have these expensive, super nice technology gadgets, and then you have these kind of clones and also fakes and stuff like that in the same direction, which are super cheap. So there are a lot of risks in this direction, especially when it comes to like malfunction of these technologies when they're not properly implemented and so on. What is, especially in the medical area, of course, very dangerous.
I'm afraid of, in the medtech or in the construction industry, what if all these technology breaks? As we can see now, it is proven that things is not working 100%. And I don't want my life to rely on something that's not working 100%.
That's definitely true. I guess that's true for most of the people.
And
maybe
also,
coming back to the topic of
doing the biohacking slide. And one of the really important things when it comes to augmented bodies or even body enhancement is that I personally don't think that we are afraid of being hacked. I think that another problem that we're having is that this entire industry might be unregulated, as the same thing as we've seen with the IoT industry when that one just boomed up from nowhere. I mean, we saw vendors creating so-called smart devices by just putting Bluetooth connectors or Wi-Fi network cards into really dumb devices, such as a smart TV. A smart TV is not a smart TV, it's a normal TV with a network card. And I don't want that to happen with, for example, biohacking or human augmentation, that we start developing products and we don't regulate it, we don't have any structures, we don't have any procedures or ISO standards or anything, and suddenly we have all these different products on the market that is not regulated, and we don't really know how to control that.
That's a very important point, because, I mean, especially some examples, what you mentioned before in the medical area, like pacemakers and stuff, they are wireless connected, or they have the ability to be connected through wireless protocols. They're very easily be able to be hacked, which may turn into malfunction, all other problems. The problem here is the same as we've seen in IoT and other technologies, that the common society, regular person, is not always able to really fully understand all of these technologies and make proper decisions, whether it's a good idea to connect, for example, your smart TV or whatever to the internet. And then we see all the problems, what we've seen like over the past years and already see now. So this definitely, this unregulation, this non-standards, this push to market, that's a huge danger in this upcoming technology trend what we have here.
Demonstrating once again the pause in conversation as we wait for David's line to augment itself back to the rest of us. It is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, technology is one of these areas where I look at the way I am with my computer, and I forgive my computer an awful lot of mistakes, drops, things go wrong. And if I was driving a car and it just suddenly decided to stop working every 5 minutes, I'd be furious. And I guess it's the same with when we augment our bodies. We're going to view it in a slightly different way than we do regular technology, aren't we, Marco?
Yeah, of course. I mean, especially the closer the technologies get to your body, to your life, the more dangerous it gets. And of course, your car was a very good example, because that's exactly a direction we're going into. And if there are no proper standards in terms of security, physical security, digital security, we're having a problem. And just imagine all of that going into your body. And I'm not just talking about the technologies to help keeping your life safe, like pacemakers and all of that stuff, but also future technologies which may be implemented into your body. Just imagine you have some brain implants and it just starts malfunctioning or drops errors or whatever. It's your brain. I mean, it's you, basically.
And I suppose you're not on an even playing field with other people. And if, what are the rules around you? There's a lot of rules. You were talking about regulations, right? And there's going to have to be a lot of thought about how that's regulated, because how do you regulate what somebody puts inside your body across international borders? It's a very complicated issue, isn't it?
That's definitely like this global regulation. That's a huge topic.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely a direction we have to work on, because else we may see these black markets and scenarios. And most of us probably know from science fiction novels and movies, where you have like these split areas, like these regulated, nice, shiny, safe, protected areas, and these kind of areas where law is missing kind of scenarios. You know what I mean? So I think that's a huge topic, and we definitely have to start earlier, like now, rather than just wait till all of this technology evolved and is there, and then we start, because that's probably the time when it's too late.
Yes. Well,
technology is evolving super fast. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, how do you keep up with it? Exactly. Well, we've spoken about biohacking in your presentation. Was there anything you wanted to add on that, or do we want to move on to the next part of the presentation?
Let's move on to the next part. Maybe David will join us for later on. The next topic, of course, and that's quite interesting, is the industry, which means like our economy, like the core of our economy. And also in this direction, there are, of course, a lot of trends going into new technologies. Either it may be implemented into humans, what we've seen, for example, with exoskeletons. That's not only a use case for example, military areas or disabled person in the medical area, but also in the industry, because more powerful people can do much more tougher jobs. But in the long run, it's the huge question if these new technologies, not only in terms of implementing to the humans, but in general, will they replace humans? Will we have industries in the future which are completely human-less kind of areas? And this is also a huge question to the society. How do we want to build our future when there may be a lot of jobs what we have nowadays will not exist in the future? Will we have new jobs? That's, of course, one direction. Or will we have some other kind of scenarios in the future how we can balance the society and mankind basically in being able to survive in this kind of scenario? I mean, the problem what I have here, especially in this industry and also medical areas, so let's say the regular area, is that we have a lot of quite negative novel stories and movies in terms of science fiction. So we have these dystopian areas and future worlds which are not quite nice to live in. So it's now the time to discuss these issues. I'm personally quite a big fan of new technologies, and I tend to see the possible gains to humans and mankind, but this always includes that we also have to have a look at the other side of the medal and see what dangers may that implement and what we can do against that to really have a balanced and more peaceful and brighter future. So definitely, let's discuss about these points here.
David has made it back just in time to talk about malfunction again on an industrial scale. So, yeah, I mean, we were just talking about industry and the impact on industry. We're kind of moved on with the slides, and I believe your closing thoughts are left. So you have about 4 minutes left. Do you want to continue, David?
So I don't know what you actually covered, but when I say industry, I'm talking about the construction industry, for example, where you have builders that is, wearing out their own bodies, and I know that there's a discussion going on to create some kind of exoskeletons and something that will help them become stronger. Like I said in the second point, super strength. But back again with the malfunction, like what are we actually trying to achieve? That is my thought. Because as Marco said, he likes new technology. He really wants to see the benefits with new technology. I'm one of those persons who is not an early adopter. I mean, I work in a complete wrong industry because I still collect VHS tapes and listen to vinyl records. I just do not like new technology. I'm kind of scared that, it affects us in the long run in a way that we can't really handle. And with that said, I've been thinking a lot about the social impact of social media or IoT or this entire connectivity, and moving forward with human augmentation. I think that, of course, there's a lot of benefits. I mean, can we somehow find a cure to Alzheimer's by analyzing, collecting data from our brains? That would be amazing. But what is the price for all of this?
Both of you on this part. We've obviously got the debate coming up, but Marco, closing thoughts from your presentation section, 2 minutes.
I think we pretty much said everything, and the baseline throughout this whole kick-off talk is definitely the call for legislation and standardization to really shape the future proactively and not just let it go and develop by its own, because this may go in the wrong direction. And with that, definitely I'm on the same side as David, that we have to have a closer look, not only on the technologies itself, but also on the impact of the society to humans, to mankind, basically, to our world. So let's discuss this. Let's talk about this. Let's look into that, and let's make a nice and bright future for all of us.
But just one point before we close is that the second point, the double-sided sword. I mean, who knew that the like button on Facebook would increase suicide rate or make teenagers feel uncomfortable in their own bodies because they're not getting enough likes on the pictures they post on Instagram? This is the thoughts that I have when it comes to human augmentation. Are we ready for this? Have we done all the research that we should do? I don't have the answers. I'm just trying to make you think about this.
Wonderful. Well, invigorating thoughts, but also some very much food for thought, and lots more questions raised, I think, than you answered. But that's good, because we've got a debate coming up next. Thank you so much to Marco and to David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, fascinating stuff. And as you've just heard, augmentation, particularly human augmentation, is an exciting field with widespread support from many different people. But also, many are also concerned about how human augmentation could develop and what changes it might bring about to the society as a whole. And today we've assembled some of the world's leading experts in the field to debate the question, is human augmentation an opportunity for humanity or a dangerous dream? To debate and hopefully answer this question, I am delighted to welcome back Marco Preuss and David Jacobi from Kaspersky's Global Research and Analysis team. And we are also joined by Zoltan Istvan, who is author and founder of the Transhumanist Party, and Julian Savulescu, who is Professor of Practical Ethics and Chair of Oxford University's Oxford Uhiro Centre for Practical Ethics. Zoltan, please, could you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. My name is Zoltan Istvan. I'm the founder of the Transhumanist Party and also an author, and I write a lot about transhumanism as well as augmentation, cyborgism, issues like that. And I just firmly believe that we can upgrade the human species to be something better than what we are right now, and that's a very good thing.
Perfect. Thank you. Julian, let's hear your perspective and introduction.
Hi, I'm originally a medical doctor, but I've been working in the field of bioethics for about 25 years, and I've been working on the ethics of human enhancement for about 20 years. So I started out by looking at cognitive enhancement. I've been working also in doping in sport, but more recently I have a book out on love drugs, enhancing love, and also another controversial book on enhancing human moral capacities.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much to both of you for joining us as well. Marco and David, obviously you've just heard from Marco and David, their sort of global views on the subject. Do you have anything to add before we start the debate? Any sort of summaries of your position that you haven't already revealed to us? Marco?
I think we
Yep. That's a good summary of your
everything.
Perfect. Okay. Well, let's get into the questions, because we've got an awful lot of ground to cover today. And first of all, I want to talk about the misconceptions about human augmentation. Kaspersky's research into the perceptions of human augmentation revealed some doubts around the use of this technology, and what do these concerns mean for the future of it? Well, Zoltan, I'd like to come to you first, if I may. What do you think about you've seen the report and the findings? What do you think about these misconceptions that humans have around the topic? Will that impact its development, or are we going to steamroller ahead anyway? Zoltan.
Well, I believe we're going to steamroll ahead anyways. I think largely augmentation, cyborgism, these things are controlled by capitalism to some extent, and people want to make money. The world needs to do these things to sort of upgrade themselves. And so whether we like it or not, it's probably all going to happen unless governments really stand up and say, let's not do this. But largely speaking, this is going to add new economic booms to times and things like that. So there are many reasons that we would want to do this. So even if there are misconceptions, and even if there are people that are really against it, I think we move forward on it. The real question is, what kind of delicacy do we have with augmenting ourselves and becoming something that's just simply more than human? And I think largely speaking, the economy will be a driver of these things, for better or worse.
Yeah, Julian, what do you feel about the misconceptions? Because obviously patients perhaps don't realise that they've been augmented for many years if they've got a hearing aid or a hip replacement, or any of these things that we've been doing to our bodies. But there is still a lot of misconception, isn't there?
Yeah, people have these science fiction dystopia kind of views of radical change to the human being. They have Frankenstein in their mind, or films like Gattaca. So first of all, it's shaped by dystopic images. Secondly, it's based on a fundamental lack of knowledge and understanding of the extraordinary inequality between human beings in terms of their capacities. So we like to have this idea that we're all equal. Now, that might be a very good prescriptive ideal. Maybe we should be all treated equally, but we are born vastly different, some with horrible diseases that will kill them in the first months of life, some with fewer cognitive resources, fewer emotional resources, fewer resources in terms of attention and concentration. And technology is enabling us not just to treat disease, but to correct those inequalities, and as Zoltan has pioneered, even taking us above normal. And lastly, we have these Hollywood ideals that, if only we worked hard, anyone could be president. We can do anything. That's the theme of Gattaca, the film for the late 90s. But that's just not true. Some people are born very lucky, very gifted, both in terms of their social resources, but also in terms of their biological and psychological resources.
Marco, what do you think? We've seen a lot of misconceptions. You've spoken about a few of them already. Do you think that this is going to hold us back? And if so, what can we do to overcome it?
I don't think it really holds us back because, as was said already, the market, the capitalism will drive it for sure. And that's also clear to me. I think there won't be any big no, let's not go this road, because as we've seen in the past, it will simply happen sooner or later. So I think it's more the question on how we use it and in which direction we develop it. And I'm totally on the side of what was just said before, that this inequality is quite an interesting topic, and maybe some of these technologies can help a lot. But this is something we will see in future.
David, same question to you. What extent do you think the misconceptions around augmentation are going to hold back the development, if at all?
So I don't think it's going to hold back technology at all. And that is actually one of the things that I'm afraid of. Because I think we should think twice before starting augmented not just our bodies, but our reality. I mean, are we actually prepared for this? Life in general, if you think about humane life, it is an unbalance. It's not fair. Some people are, I hope I'm not lagging too much. Some people are just, born beautiful. Some are not. Some are strong. Some are not. It's just the way life and the world is. And that's part of life, to actually learn that life is not fair. And I think that if you look at life today, it's, we're not more happy because we have more filters. We're not happy because we have, all this different technology that is so-called supposed to help us. We are actually less happy and less active. And, of course, technology helps us in some way. But I personally, I'm not a big fan of this development.
I mean, I guess things like, plastic surgery, would be a good sort of comparison in terms of some people are born, with what they feel are less beautiful faces, and they have them changed through surgery. So it's something that we've society is beginning to be acceptant of. Yes, David.
Yeah. So I think back to the question with regulation. I absolutely think that people who have a body deformation should be able to solve that deformation with whatever kind of surgery that's needed for them to live a so-called normal life. But for me, the question is, when you take a normal life and you enhance it to something that's not normal, to something that's not, even physically possible. For example, the beauty industry with the breast implants. Do we need people with, extremely big breasts? Probably not. Do we need people with so-called duck-faced lips? Probably not. We are taking the body enhancement into an era where we shouldn't. Yes. Of course, we should help people. It should be regulated. But when you go above or beyond what is supposed to do, then you have a problem.
Well, when I posed the question to my Twitter following this morning, one of the responses was that they want a monkey tail. So I guess when we get to putting monkey tails on humans, that's probably so they can climb trees more easily. That's probably a step too far. Okay, next question then. I want to talk about how human augmentation should develop over the next 10 or 20 years. One of the interesting things that came out of the report was the varying confidence in the future of human augmentation. And while many people are happy with current forms of human augmentation, some are worried about what will happen in the future. So I pose the question, how do you see it developing over the next 10 to 20 years, and what, in your opinion, is the best way forwards? Julian, let's come to you first on that one.
Well, I mean, how will it develop? It will develop through market forces, and those developments will be aimed at maximising maximising profits for large multinational companies. But how it should develop is that we actually need a compass. We need a kind of moral compass, to use that horrible term. The problem today is we don't have values. We think that values are just in the eye of the beholder. Whatever's good for you, whatever you think is good for you. You want duck-shaped lips, that's good for you. You want a monkey tail, that's good for you. And that, I think, is leading to catastrophe. So what we do need to identify are, what is well-being? What is a good life? Is it just happiness? Is it developing certain sorts of talents? Is it having certain kinds of relationships? And using that account of well-being, trying to identify what sorts of enhancements are truly good for people and which ones are harmful, rather than either leaving it to the market or leaving it to individuals to decide, yes, I think deafness is an enhancement and I'm going to deafen my child. So I think what the crisis that we face is a crisis that the whole of society faces in so many areas. We've moved into a postmodernist relativistic view where there are no objective or semi-objective values that can guide development and assessment. And the other important issue is not just well-being, but what are our obligations to each other? What are the limits of state intrusion into our relationships with other people, and when is it necessary? So what is morality, and how should that guide the development of our technology?
It's interesting, David. I'm going to come to you next, and I want to actually just, with next 10 to 20 years, how should it develop? And let's take a moment to think back over the last 20 years. I've been reporting on tech since 1995, 25 years ago, and there's no way you could have predicted where we are now. So with that in mind, where will we be 10 to 20 years' time with this? Or where should we be?
As you said, I've also been in the security industry for 25 years, and one of the common things that we've seen for the last 2-3 decades is that we develop things, and afterwards we find out all the problems with whatever we developed. And do we want to have that with human augmentation? I mean, for example, the like button, which is a very simple example. We had no idea that would cause suicide rates or unhappiness over almost 200%. And when enhancing, I shouldn't say augmented, but when enhancing your body, is that going to divide the society into more groups than we have today? Are we going to have like a super species on one side who can afford human augmentation, and then we have the people who cannot do it, which are basically becoming without jobs because they cannot compete with the people who have exoskeletons or whatever kind of eyesight, night vision or whatever. Because I think if we should develop this in the right direction, we should do it with technology that can benefit our health. I think the health industry should move the technology forward, not economy, which we've seen in the past. It's always economy. But now maybe we should think twice and say, okay, we are doing this technology to save lives and make people happy instead of making them better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Zoltan, it's the more we talk about this, it's sounding more and more like a sci-fi movie. What do you think about the next 10 to 20 years and how we should approach it? Where should we go with this technology?
Well, maybe contrary to some of my colleagues, I feel quite strongly that we need to let people decide what they want to do with the technology. And as long as it's not hurting somebody else directly, we shouldn't be a judge of what somebody's health is. My perfect health is not necessarily being a biological human being. It might be being ones and zeros uploaded into a computer, or being a super transhuman being with all sorts of augmented parts. That might be how I view perfect health, and maybe millions of others around the world. And if we have access to that technology and want to develop it, we should have the right to have that. And that's why I think market forces are probably best left to at least get the entire augmentation kind of race going. And maybe there's some part for some regulation by governments and such, but broadly speaking, we should let the individual be responsible for the kinds of things that they want to do to their own bodies. And I think, in 10, 20 years, we're also facing this idea that if we're not better than machines, not better than robots in terms of what we can do economically and work-wise, then we're also going to lose ground to, robots and automation taking all our jobs. So there's this other pressure about we're augmenting ourselves not just to because we want to improve our health, but because we actually want to remain competitive in the workplace. And I think that might end up being the largest motivation of the augmentation kind of race that we're discussing here today.
But what about disclosure I'm going to use a really sort of basic example, but, say somebody wants to have children with blue eyes. Blue eyes is a recessive gene, so they look specifically for a mate with matching blue eyes to theirs. Somebody's augmented their eyes to a different colour, so they're not... Do you get what I'm saying? You're not getting what you see when you buy into that emotional relationship. How should that be tackled in that instance then?
Well, I think, I come down on the side of personal liberties. I just think everybody should be able to do what they want so long as it's not directly harming another person. And ultimately speaking, this is very tough because it's very difficult for the world and society to decide what is morally correct or what is natural or what is the normal line for humanity. But ultimately speaking, whenever we try to put too many barriers in front of people's personal decisions, we end up in a society that is less free. And I think we can all agree that freedom is probably a higher kind of goal than the cyborg debate, than almost any debate that's really out there. So I think we need to let people make those decisions themselves, and of course the marketplace will follow that and try to enhance, allow people to get what they want.
Okay, same question to you. Next 10 to 20 years, what would you like to see on the table for development?
Maybe let me go to what the three others before said. Especially this type of freedom. I agree, freedom is super important. But it's always a question on what level this freedom is expressed. And of course, one person can take their own decisions and do whatever they want. But how is a single person, a regular person, able to foresee the impact on the whole society with what this one person does? You never know. We have a social system, for example. So if all of these decisions, what a single person does, may fall back to society, that was not foreseen. But it's a problem then for society, not for the single person. So I think an important point here is this: we're at the moment at a very self-focused world. I guess, or I hope at least, that the others would agree to that. I mean, especially in social networks and all of that, you clearly see that this self-expression and so on is like the major driver. So the caring about society and the rest of the people is less important than the own benefit and own expression. So if we go with this more self-driven approach in terms of freedom, I think this will go down a road which may be very tricky. If we rather develop more into a direction where people restart thinking about the society and the groups and all the other people around them, which would be more natural, I believe, then this may go in a better direction. So that's always the question. We may end in a world which is described, for example, in Gattaca, where you have like these two different societies, the ones which are augmented on a DNA base and the others not, so the different levels. Or we may end up in a better world for all of us. That's the main question. The freedom for mankind or the freedom for a single individual. Nobody has an answer to that yet. This is a discussion, and I guess the development of the mankind itself will define at some point in which direction it want to go.
Freedom is all very well, but of course your freedom to choose is necessarily, when it comes to technology, often driven by your ability to afford. We already have a digital divide that we're dealing with, just with the internet and smartphones. So Marco, do you think that the next 10 to 20 years will see that built in to the fabric of our society even more, where we have this, we were talking, Zoltan was saying about augmenting for work practices. Well, what happens if jobs then become reliant on augmented humans to do the job, and so those who can't afford the augmentation, it's not an option for them? Go on, Marco, sorry.
That's exact the scenario what was kind of described in Gattaca, but also many other novels and movies on the terms of science fiction, that such or certain groundbreaking technologies will have a dividing factor, means you have a multi-level or at least two-class kind of society, but on a way broader scale than what we have now. I mean, of course, in airplanes you may have a first class and an economy class, but this split will be way bigger. It will be a kind of a comparison to, are you on an airplane or are you on a wooden boat on the ocean alone? Kind of split, I would say. So this is a huge topic, and that's exactly what I mean. It's the society should or need to define which values are important for the society and for the individual, to define in which direction we all want to go, either together or everybody by himself, and then we will see what will happen, which will be definitely this kind of separation classes.
David, you wanted to add to that?
Yes, thank you. I think we also should look at the biological impact of human augmentation. I mean, we've seen people augment their reality through heroin or cocaine or crack, and I don't have any good examples of when this has actually been beneficial for society. And if we start augmenting our body or our reality with technology, where do we actually stop? I mean, of course, you can maybe make yourself stronger or faster or have night vision, but are you going to stop there? Or are we going to actually, on a social level, change our ways, our bodies, our way of living so much that it kind of gets out of control? So I think Marco is actually on a right point, that I don't think it's up to every single individual to choose the freedom if they should augment their body or not. It has to be regulated, because, I mean, let's just make cocaine and heroin free, and everybody can choose if they want to shoot heroin on the streets or not. No, we can't, because it has a social impact.
Do any of these sort of points, concerns, echo your feelings? I'm guessing they probably do in a respect.
Sorry, I think there is this very important point about freedom, which Zoltan has rightly raised. I'm a great supporter of freedom. My father escaped from Romania after the Second World War to escape communism and lost everything, and had to live a very difficult life as a factory worker, and said to me, always choose freedom. So I'm a great fan of freedom, but we're much less free than we imagine ourselves to be. The problem is not so much technology being expensive and it causing inequality. It's people becoming addicted to technology to provide profits. So what Google and Facebook do is capture your attention. Kaspersky and other gamers will know how to addict people to games. And so in the US, you see people being free to die of obesity. And Big Macs are extremely cheap. They're not expensive. So it's true that that technology disperses, but it disperses in a way that takes advantage of the huge numbers of vulnerabilities and limitations that humans have. Humans are great imitators. They will copy each other. Humans are driven by social status and jealousy. And so they'll want to try to achieve more material wealth or other markers of social success over other people. And it's these forces which I think are going to be the ones that shape the development of technology. And it's these forces which will precisely make people's lives go worse. So although I'm a fan of freedom in theory, I think we have to acknowledge the extraordinary limitations of freedom. And in many ways, human beings are unfit for freedom.
That's brilliant. I love that sentiment. Zoltan, do you want to come back on any of these statements before we move to the third conversation point?
Well, I largely agree with what Julian said. I think it is challenging. A lot of humans might not be, fit for freedom. But at the same time, historically speaking, when we stop this stuff, when we stop evolution, the world stops and it doesn't progress. And I think that's where we just have to throw our weight, our resources and things like that, just to trust that in the end of the day, technology will be beneficial to humanity as it always has been. And look on historical references. It's a win-win situation, even if it poses great challenges.
I've been evangelizing technical transformation, digital transformation for years, and I see people, trying to stop it. It's a bit like trying to hold back the tide with your hands. It's just not going to happen. You may as well swim with it. Okay, final point then, and I'm going to come to David first, I believe, on this one. We're going to open questions in the audience from the audience in a moment. But first of all, the really big question that this raises is human augmentation ultimately an opportunity or a threat to humanity? I know it's that's very black and white, and I know there's probably a whole load of grey territory in the middle there. But David, let's come to you first on this one. Threat or opportunity?
Even though I'm not a big fan of, adopting new technology in my own life, I do think it is an opportunity because I really believe that we are able to save lives with human augmentation and specifically the medtech, and also maybe even people with depression or some other kind of psychology issues. I think it is beneficial for us as a whole, but there is a but. We have to do research and see how the social and financial impacts it has on our lives. And I'm afraid that we will not do that in the extent that we need, because finance is driving technology forward in a pace that we can't really handle. So with that said, it is good for us, but it will also be bad for us.
Work for companies like Kaspersky to do, presumably, to make sure that we don't do an Internet of Things, where we introduce whole loads of new vulnerabilities into our daily lives. That's a lot of work for you guys, I guess, is it? David?
Yes, it is a lot of work because we are now researching things that doesn't really exist. We're researching things that will come in the future. And of course, we are limited as a company to do certain kind of research. And we rely on other kind of industries and other kind of institutions to do research on whatever they're experts on. We are expert in computer security and IT security, not on the social or financial impact of technology. But we're doing our best to cover as much as possible. But I mean, of course, we will try our best to do vulnerability and security research when it comes to this kind of body technology, or whatever you want to call it.
It completely changes the meaning of sort of the engineering role, doesn't it? Julian, same question to you then, and obviously as our ethics expert on the panel, what are the ethical implications of these emerging technologies? What are the biggest ethical questions?
Well, I mean, the question of whether it will be good for us or bad for us or it could be both. Whenever you're talking about an enormously powerful technology, it can be used to great advantage or misused. Nuclear power can be used to destroy humanity or to provide energy very efficiently. And the basic point I would say is we have a moral obligation to pursue this ethically, because if we do nothing, we're allowing people to have worse lives than they could have had. We're consigning them to a future that, in the worst case, is nasty, brutish and short, as Thomas Hobbes famously said. So we can't just sit on our hands and we can't just say, well, it's better to stop it or to ban it. We have to try to direct it away from the bad and towards the good. And in order to do that, we need values like freedom, and I agree with Zoltan that we, in the end, need to allow people to make their own decisions, but we also need to guide and structure the technologies that are made available and the choices that they make for themselves towards better lives for themselves, lives which are longer, happier, more fulfilling. So one example of a no-brainer for human enhancement is delaying human ageing, which is within our capacity to do. So I think that the key ethical issue is, first of all, to realise that we can't just do nothing or leave it to nature or to leave it to the market. We have to take the challenge in our hands and try to shape technology in a way that enables people to have better lives and as has been said very eloquently, also to enable society to progress. But we have to try to work out, first of all, what is progress and what is a better life. And we haven't answered those fundamental ethical questions yet.
Zoltan, clearly you're a fan of these technologies, so I'm guessing you see them as an opportunity. But are there any concerns for you moving into the future of how we approach augmentation?
Well, to me, the true largest concern would be that people would try to restrict it, that governments around the world, on the basis of trying to generate equality or generate what they might call the status quo, would stop it. And therefore, we would lose time in terms of evolution. As Julian correctly, said, we're talking about overcoming aging. We're talking about becoming, better human beings. The disabled can walk again. I mean, they can hear, they can do things. Everybody being almost perfectly fit. These are great, noble things to aspire to. And I think, while there's a lot of talk about how this is good for the economy or bad, or how this is good for equality or bad for it, there's this other option about kind of going to the moon type of thing. This is a brand new adventure for humanity to go on, and we want to see how far we can go, because we don't need to be limited to this, 3 meters of flesh and the 3 pounds of meat that we have on our shoulders as a brain. I mean, we can become something greater. We can become something more interesting, more creative, and we can also get off planet. So following cyborgism, following augmentation is not just about what's best for society, and even if it does cause some disruptions, it's also about aspiring to something greater than ourselves. And that's really one of the main reasons that I support it.
And Marco, to you then, threat or opportunity?
I would also say opportunity, because all the rest was just said before. I mean, we need to dive more into, but I wouldn't just stamp or rate new technology and upcoming technology as a threat per se. It's always the question, what do we make out of this technology? So opportunity.
Very good, very concise words there. Right, it's over to you now for your questions. So don't forget, you can use the form on the page if you've got any questions. We've got some journalist questions come in, and these are the ones that I've got here, I believe. What would the panelist advise that the companies or employers do now to prepare for the onset of human augmentation? And that's a great question, because obviously everybody's looking at the world and the way that it changes around them. Technology changes so quickly. Is there anything that the world of business can do to make sure that they're ready for this evolution as and when it becomes mainstream? Who would like to take that?
Well, one thing which they can do, which many employees are already using cognitive enhancers or low doses of LSD to increase their creativity. So what companies should do is take a position on what practices around cognitive enhancement should be in their company. And decide, are they going to have a laissez-faire attitude, allow employees to take whatever they want? Are they going to make it available? Are they going to set limits on it? So, for example, Duke University has banned cognitive enhancement on its campuses, and I think that's a mistake. But companies will start to need to think for themselves ethically about how to embrace this revolution and what they see is a good application of it, or whether they'll just be committed to freedom and allow people to do whatever they want.
We've got a question. Oh, yes, you wanted David to add something to that?
Yeah, so my thought is that maybe the private and the public sector should work together as well to create some kind of legislation. Like, this is actually what we want to have in each industry, for example, which each industry can tell the government, this is how we want to use human augmentation. This is the restrictions that we see. This is the benefits that so we can have some kind of maybe an ISO standard or regulations for this new type of technology. We messed up when it comes to IoT. We failed. We did that years after IoT was out there, and I don't think we should do the same mistake over again.
No, I really hope that we've learnt from that mistake. We have a question from Guy Falconbridge from Reuters. What's your biggest fear about human augmentation? Would it not give states vast potential power over populations to potentially even change the doors of perception? What do we think? Do we worry about the balance of power, Zoltan? Can we maybe come to you?
Sure. I don't worry about the balance of powers. I know there's a lot of people out there that like to think that the government's out to get us, or that people will use all this technology to control us. But I think they forget that when young people are going to college, one of the leading kind of fields to study these days is cybersecurity. And I always advise students to go into that field. If you want to have a good job here in the next few decades, I think that's a great arena to be in, because there are always going to be people that want to protect individual liberties. There's always going to be people that want to protect the technology that we use inside ourselves. And it's largely the same thing with pacemakers or with even driverless cars, some of these other things. Yes, there'll be issues, and yes, it'll be hacking will be sensationalized. But in the end of the day, these technologies make our lives more functional, and the government and private companies are not out there only to try to somehow restrict us or monetize us, all these other things. There's actually people out there in the world out at large, I think, that largely wants to use technology to improve the human race and just to improve humanity as a whole. And I think we can trust that. Doesn't mean there's not going to be a balance of powers, but definitely it's going to end up, for the good.
Yes, David.
So it's not just about enhancing your own body to be able to do fun stuff in life, or enjoying an augmented reality. I mean, I'm a little bit afraid of, for example, the military augmented soldiers, which makes with the question like if will there be a power battle? Yes, there will. I think you will have soldiers who are more beneficial than others, and they are meant for something good, but the outcome will be something bad. I also think that when you look at movies such as X-Men, where you have mutants who are living in the normal world, maybe we'll have the opposite to X-Men. We'll have individuals who augmented their bodies, who are competing with people who did not augment their bodies, which is not really fair. It's like the sports industry. doping is not, enhancing your body when it comes to sports is not allowed. Should it be allowed in other industries?
It's a very good point, and actually leads us. Oh, Julian, yes. Did you want to add something?
So I think there's just one small perspective missing here. The world is not merely the US and Europe. China is a major player now, as is Russia. And China is a world leader in enhancement technology. They're leading the world in gene editing. They've produced gene-edited babies, which was an enhancement to confer immunity to HIV. But they're also spending billions of dollars and have the world's largest facility at trying to identify the genes for intelligence, because they want to enhance intelligence in their society. And their values aren't going to be the same as the values in the US and Europe. And so I think I have to ask what is going to happen in the rest of the world or other parts of the world as they become able to control obedience, to control attention, to control creativity, to control or enhance intelligence. So I'm interested to see how it unfolds in China.
Raises another very interesting ethical question, of course, doesn't it? What about compulsory augmentation? On the global stage, if an entire country or even a continent are all, intellectually enhanced, how can the rest of the world compete with new inventions, new product developments? It's a whole tangled mess, isn't it, Julian?
Well, I think you've also got to sort of destigmatize this debate a bit. We've had enhancement ever since human, creativity began. Reading and writing are enhancements. The electric light bulb is an enhancement. Education is an enhancement. Education is compulsory. So when an enhancement is clearly beneficial and clearly safe, we may well make it compulsory, and there's nothing wrong with that if it's actually making our lives go better. So the question is not, is it going to be compulsory or not? The important question is it good for us? Well, that's what I would say is the most important question. And I don't have a problem with making computers compulsory in school if they enable children to learn better and to enhance themselves. People tend to think of genetic engineering or cyborgs, brain-computer interfaces, as these radically different things. But we're already radically changing our lives with social media, the internet, and the essential question is not, is it inside our body or inside our genes or outside? The question is it good for us? And does it promote our freedom or does it undermine it? And I think many of these enhancements or augmentations or interventions may well undermine freedom and well-being if used in the wrong way.
I do know a couple of people who have been augmented with NFC chip technology. Do we have any NFC chipped people on the panel? We've got one on the panel there, Zoltan. Well done. I mean, do you have any sort of further to add on this question? We've kind of moved it into different areas, talking about, perhaps intelligence and compulsory enhancements. Anything further to add on that now?
Well, I just want to say I agree tremendously with Julian about China. China is now starting to lead the world in a lot of these radical augmentation technologies. And, China, let's be honest, is a secular nation versus Europe and America, which have a Judeo-Christian background. There's also some religious or maybe, cultural differences. And these things could play out very large over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And if the West, let's say, is too conservative and doesn't want to move forward, and then we have other nations like China that are moving forward, well, we're going to have geopolitical security issues. We're going to have national issues. I mean, we're going to be left behind. So there's also this idea that just from a purely economical, political, and cultural point of view, we're going to have to keep up with those that want to lead the world forward. And whether it's a good thing or not. And I think, like Julian said, if it's good for society, if we can largely say this benefits us, then it's okay to say, let us do this. In fact, let's even make it compulsory. I mean, that's a good thing. I don't want to have bad health. I don't want to die. Some of these other, typical transhumanist things, if we can avoid that through these types of technology and just make our lives better, why not do it? In fact, why not encourage it?
I'd be interesting to know if any of you out in the audience have got any enhancements yourself. If you need chips put anywhere in your body, just shout out in chat if you have. We've got a question from Danijel Lijovic from Croatia, and I'm sorry if I'm going to completely get your company name wrong or your publication name. It's a Vesernigi List. Maybe one of you already know that, but her question is, for all, would you let enhanced humans compete in the Olympics? And we were talking about this yesterday, actually, just off to the side. Marco, you're kind of giggling a little bit, but I think, could we maybe even see an enhanced Olympics at some point in the future?
Well, I guess that would go exactly in this direction, like not competing with regular people, but having a separated Olympics or whatever for augmented people, because as it may be kind of unfair, but even that answer is maybe not very nice, because it already shows this difference in starting split. When we're talking about augmentation, you will have these non-augmented and the augmented. Which of both will be in the long run the stick to?
Right. I mean, it brings me to mind of the argument around Formula One racing. Several years back, when there was so much technological sort of tweaking and innovation that actually the vehicles started to become considerably dangerous to drive, and so they started to put limitations. Julian, what do you think about the question from Danielle? Competing in the Olympics, do you think we'll see an enhanced Olympics at some point in the future?
Well, again, you've got to start from reality, not some sort of fiction that you want to believe in. And the reality is you're already looking at an enhanced Olympics. I've been working on this again for 20 years. And, the best estimates, independent estimates, even the World Anti-Doping Agency's own surveys, put the prevalence of doping amongst medal winners in the Olympics at between 1/3 and 2/3. So, at least 1/3 of medals are by enhanced athletes. I think there have only been 10 people who have ever run under 9.8 seconds, and 9 of them have been involved in doping. It's only Usain Bolt who has no allegations or proof of doping. So you already are looking at it. Now, how should this progress? And, what I've argued is that there are 2 values that need to define whether we allow some sort of augmentation. First of all, is it safe enough? And the doping practices that athletes are engaging in today are safe, as opposed to the stuff that the East Germans did 30 or 40 years ago. And secondly, does it protect the spirit of sport? And here you have to do some ethical work, some philosophical work, because what we want from sport is it to test certain sorts of talents and to test something that's fundamentally human. So, for example, Mike Tyson took cocaine during boxing, which will reduce fear and pain. That's something that is alien to the goals of boxing. Taking beta blockers to reduce tremor in archery or shooting reduces the test of the relevant ability. But taking steroids to enable you to train harder doesn't undermine the spirit of running. So I think we're going to have to start getting off the fence from this zero tolerance and this idea that all drugs are bad and all enhancements are bad, to deciding which enhancements are we going to allow and which ones are we going to ban. I think we made a mistake by allowing Oscar Pistorius into the able-bodied Olympics with his blades for amputation, because those blades have to be limited in their design to stop him overtaking Usain Bolt. I mean, he could run faster than Usain Bolt. And I think allowing that level of augmentation is going to change the character of running. It might be an interesting race, but it's a different kind of race to the 100 metres that involves unenhanced humans.
Raises the moral question of whose call is it to make, to make those limitations? Who gets to make that decision, and on whose side the argument does that fall? Zoltan, I mean, I don't know about you. I think an enhanced Olympics would be a pretty fine thing to watch, apart from anything else. But do you think? Would you see it happening?
Absolutely. I've written about a transhumanist Olympics for years now. I think it's probably the Olympics as they are right now should be left alone. Try to not have any drugs, whatever. But there should be a second type of Olympics that also happens. One that is, anything kind of goes, or, depending on whatever the sport. I mean, maybe there'll be some regulations, of course, but I mean, who doesn't want to see, they have some of these new injections that can make it so you don't have to breathe for 10, 15 minutes. When you talk about free diving, the capacities for that kind of thing. Or when you talk about, there's a very good chance with the Paralympics that maybe in 10 or 20 years' time, we're going to have a quadriplegic person using, exoskeleton technology run far faster than Usain Bolt on 100 yards, 100 meters. These things will come to pass. And who doesn't want to watch that besides the economic benefits, besides the kind of, excitement about a whole new sporting event? Who doesn't want to see those kinds of things? And this could be very good in turning culture and getting people to say, wait a sec, augmentation is actually beneficial for people and beneficial to watch and just constructive for society as a whole to move forward down that direction. But I would 100% support these types of Olympics.
I have to say, though, I've seen my colleague from BBC Click, Spencer Kelly, using a pair of exoskeleton legs, and it's hard to see anybody running terribly fast in them at the moment. I'm sure eventually the technology will advance. David, would you buy a ticket to the enhanced Olympics?
I actually would, but I don't like the idea to mix the normal unenhanced Olympics with enhanced Olympics. I think you should compete fair. And with that said, I don't like doping in general. I think it's unfair. It's not good for sports at all. I think you should be completely fair, but I do not mind seeing an enhanced Olympics, because then that would be fair, because then everybody has a chance to enhance whatever they're enhancing.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got another question here. This one is from Anonymous. Which industries do you think will be the early adopters? So Zoltan, we were speaking about, obviously industrial. Oh, David's got something ready to go. So David, what do you think? You're obviously very, very strong feeling.
Yeah, so I believe, of course, medical industry, medtech will be an pioneer in this, but also the sex and the drug industry will probably be part of this. I'm not really saying that with a smile on my face, but I just think it's the truth. We want to enhance our feelings, and
yes,
the sex industry has been pioneering technology for a very long time.
Yeah, well, it's fair to say the adult entertainment industry has always been a big driver for technology adoption. Zoltan, what do you think about the industries that are going to be early adopters?
Well, I think the most important industry is certainly going to be when we talk about brain implants or neural prosthetics type things that Elon Musk and Brian Johnson at Kernel are working on. It's hard to know exactly how far this technology has come and whether we can trust the media. But if Elon Musk is, held to his word, sometime in the next 5 to 7, 8 years, we should have something on the market that connects our brain and our thoughts into the cloud. And I think when you talk about kind of jobs that are being lost, like Wall Street, many mid-level traders are being laid off because algorithms and computers can do these things. But if people can think in real time in the cloud and at least have some capacity for that, I think that leads us to a whole new field of things in terms of being an attorney, arguing in court, or being a doctor and having a database of information in your background, your mind that you can readily access. Even if it takes far longer than 5 to 7 years, let's say it just takes 10, 20, 30 years, one day this is going to be everything. And maybe it's not going to be a brain implant, maybe it'll just be a headset. But brainwave technology and access to the cloud and thinking in real time is certainly going to be the one thing that I think really transforms humanity and leads us down a very different direction, very, very sci-fi direction, but probably very interesting.
Well, our next question is from another journalist. I'm going to ask for a vocal augmentation in the future because I'm going to get this horribly wrong. But Serjan Dmitrievic, close maybe, asks who should be the one to set some rules about human augmentation in each country and globally. So, who should be the rule maker? Who would like to take this question? Marco, why don't you? David, go for it, David. Who should be the rule setter?
I don't think it's up to every individual country to have their own regulations when it comes to human augmentation. There are institutions. I mean, we have the European Union in Europe that is handling a lot of these questions, setting rules for at least the countries that's part of the European Union. I mean, globally, we do have politicians that meet. We do have industry leaders who meet. I don't think it would be a big problem, to be honest. Because I think everybody is quite good on communicating with each other.
Okay. Yes, Marco.
Basically would say the same. That was one thing I received over the previous answers. Several times I hear this countries or certain country names. And I think for these kind of developments, we shouldn't be bound into this country versus country or country level itself. This is a question to mankind, basically. So we have to find ways to either communicate on certain levels in terms of regional, EU was mentioned by David, industry, and so on. But let's not break it down to all the small countries and bigger countries, because that's definitely the wrong direction this could go.
Julian, did you have something you wanted to add quickly to that question about who should be the rule setter?
Yeah, I think both of those are very problematic because, the United Nations, the European Union, the World Medical Association, governments have been historically disastrous at creating laws and guidelines. The European Union is dominated by Catholic pressure groups. And in this case, unfortunately, I'm on the side of Zoltan that, until we can get a body with some expertise and some vision to actually set those rules, we ought to leave it to individuals, because I don't know of any world government or anybody that would set a reasonable set of rules. The stuff that comes out on gene editing is just junk, and fortunately, it doesn't have any bite with the scientists. And I think we need to guide people, but we don't have any effective world government or organisation to properly regulate this.
And of course, there is the enduring problem that technology moves so quickly that policymakers find it really, really hard to keep up with the flow. Well, thank you so much for your thought-provoking debate. Don't go anywhere, because before we go, I'm going to ask you to do a summary. There's certainly a lot to consider as we watch this technology develop, but I would like to get the final thoughts from our panelists, just to round off if there's something that you would like the audience to take away from today, or something that you haven't had the chance to say yet. Zoltan, I'm going to come to you first, if I may. Your final thoughts on human augmentation.
Sure. Well, I'd like to start a little bit more on what Julian mentioned with China. Beyond just the idea of whether augmentation is good for humanity, is really the question of whether we need to keep up with it because other nations are moving forward with it. And I think on the question of augmentation, if you have a country like China that already has socialistic, communistic forces behind it, the West, which is supposedly free, must keep up with it and must try to dominate the technology so that it remains in the hands of those who believe in liberty. And I think we can use those technologies to enhance the world and make it a better place while retaining our sense of humanity as well as our sense of what's right in the world.
Julian, to you, your final thoughts, please.
Enhancement is inevitable. To be human is to be better. What we should try and do is make sure it is better. So this is going to happen, and we need to try to shape it in a better direction than we have shaped technology. I agree with Zoltan that so far technology has been a great positive for humanity, but we live on a razor's edge where nuclear war, biological weapons could destroy humanity. And as I've argued, we may even need to enhance the moral capacities of humans to deal with the enormously powerful technology that they've created.
Good point. Very good point. David, your final thoughts.
It's difficult to be one of the last people summarizing an interesting panel like this because everyone said so many smart things. But I think everybody understands that my take on this is about humanity and making it a humane technology that will benefit us health-wise, and making everyone who has some kind of health problem or other problem to come up to a so-called normal level. Whatever normal is very difficult to define, of course. But I don't believe in enhancing, our reality to something that doesn't exist. I know that we've been doing it before, but I just don't believe in it.
Fair enough. Marco, final thought from you then as well before we move on.
I agree. There was a lot of different things raised during this panel, which was super interesting. From my perspective, as I said before, let's try to use the opportunities of these technologies. Let's try to reduce the risk to society. And let's try to move towards focus on society and mankind, so it's beneficial to all of us and not just individuals. And one important thing really is let's also rethink this nation border thingy, because in the long run, in terms of augmentation, a new kind of mankind basically, we need to evolve all of this as well.
Great thoughts to end on. Well, Zoltan, Julian, Marco, David, thank you so much for your time, your thoughts and your expertise. It's been absolutely fascinating. And thank you to you as well for your questions. Well, a lot to think about there, and it is time now to give you a chance to do that as we take a 10-minute comfort break. And if you head over to the screening room, you can also catch the tomorrow unlocked film Hack Scene, which explores how healthcare was attacked during COVID and how solidarity formed to fight back. We'll see you in 10. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us again. I hope you all managed to watch at least some of the Hack Scene film during the break. And we have a special fireside chat with one of the stars of the film in just a bit. But first up, we have a presentation from Dmitry Golov. He's from Kaspersky Global Research and Analysis team, and he's going to be talking about the infamous Android banking malware Cerberus. We'll have time for questions again from you at the end, so please do make sure you add them to the chat, and I will pose them to Dmitry after his presentation. I will try and get your names correct as much as I can. But now, please welcome Dmitry Golov.
Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot. That's a pleasure for me to be here today, at least virtually. So today we'll talk about one of our latest research, which is called Cerberus is Dead, Long Live Cerberus. So, by the way, the name of the conference is Kaspersky NEXT. So there will be a special prize for the one who can count the exact amount of times that I say next during the presentation. So next slide, please. So let's start with old days and have a look at what we've already seen in such world of banking malware for Android. And there is a super big subgroup which is related to malware as a service and malware which is distributed on this basis. So usually when we are talking about some banking malware or some malware in general, we are talking about some particular actor or some cybercriminal group or something like that. And we think that they are doing everything from scratch. So they are doing everything on their own from the very beginning to the very end. But that's not the case. So during the last 5 to 10 years, depending on the malware we are talking about, such thing as malware as a service is getting more and more popular. And that's why, because there are people who are writing malware really professionally, and they are creating really sophisticated pieces of malware, and they know how to maintain this infrastructure related to this malware. And there are smaller cybercriminals who are aware of the ways how to distribute this malware among users, or how to steal money or data afterwards. So such groups are meeting at various underground forums in order to sell, to buy, or to cooperate. And we are constantly monitoring them in order to be aware of what's going on and to track activities. So today we'll talk about Android malware. And let's start with several cases we've seen in the past. So one of the first ones was Marcher, that was malicious Android botnet, which afterwards was transferred to Exabot, and it was active from 2015 to 2018. After that, that was Red Alert, which was 17 to 19, and the latest example, I think that you've heard about that was Anubis. And Anubis was popular and active from 17 to 19 as well. And afterwards, it got just burned out, and there is some activity which is going on afterwards, but it is not the same. So next slide, please. Today, I will introduce you with a new sophisticated Android banking malware, which is also actively distributed on malware as a service basis on various underground forums. And our research team has been tracking this malware since July 2019, when it appeared after Anubis was, we can say, taken down. So throughout this year, we've been tracking the activity and trying to find the new improvements in the functionality, in the distribution methods, and so on. Next slide, please. So the improvements and everything they've done, the threat actors done, led to the point when they managed to release Cerberus version 2. It was in April. And that was like a turning point, because from that time they had a lot of interesting functionality, such as two-factor authentication grabber, new injection module, other minor fixes and features. And on the slide, you can see like the full release note for version 2 and all the new features they've included in it. As well, you can see the price list for the bot licenses. So as you can understand, it's not a lot. So cybercriminals are paying from $4,000 to $12,000 for 3 to 12 months of rental. So and let's have a look, what are they getting for that money? Next slide, please. So they are getting a modular bot that can covertly send and receive SMS codes, open tailored overlays, steal two-factor authentication codes. And also there is a lot of additional functionality, such as accessing contact lists, ability to redirect calls, to tamper with mobile functionality using the remote access tools features, and so on. Next slide, please. Also, for that price, the cybercriminals are getting an administrative panel, which is used to control the botnet. It's not a botnet, but control the bots. And create different tasks, monitor all the information that was stolen from the user's devices, download, custom injects, and so on and so on. Next slide. So on this slide, you can have a look at the admin panel itself. And the most interesting part is that it is designed the way that any kind of cybercriminal who is interested but has no understanding what's going on under the hood can operate it. So in here you can see that there is a list of available injects, a list of functionality which is possible, just like to get contacts or to show notification, etc., etc. Let's go. Next slide. So this is so you can ask me what is the main scenario of this banking malware? Because before that I was talking mainly about stealing some information which is already on the device, or about functionality related to controlling messages and calls, whatever. But the main magic happens when it comes to overlays, and in this technique there is nothing new actually. So banking malware is abusing it, and not only banking malware is abusing this technique for a long time. And the main point of this technique is showing fake overlay windows to users when they're trying to use some application, and trying to trick them and fool them in order to make them input some credit card information or credentials for online banking in this fake window. So the thing is that mainly when we're observing Android banking malware, these malicious families are focusing some kind of very limited countries or limited banks, but Cerberus is malware as a service, and that's why they're having dozens of them. So on this slide you can see that some examples of overlays which are tailored to abuse banking applications. Next slide, please. On this slide you can see that there is also online retail applications, some electronic commerce applications, and so on. Next slide, please. And here you can see that Cerberus is even abusing applications which are related to social networks, to messengers. And the story was that at first, when cyber criminals behind Cerberus were developing their service, they were trying to create these overlays on their own, and even trying to outsource them, finding different people on underground forums who can create these mimics. But afterwards, they found a really better solution. Next slide, please. So even a kid could use this tool. It was straightforward and really simple. And afterwards, customers could use their custom overlays or even share them among the customers, and just create more and more different overlays for more and more different applications. So next slide, please. At that time, everything seemed really good and shiny for that guys who were behind Cerberus. They were openly trying to make fun of different antivirus vendors, different researchers, tweeting about that without any doubt, just checking out the virus total detections, trying to fool everyone, and writing about that. Next slide, please. And but not all the people were happy with that. And antivirus vendors were obviously not so happy with that, but even customers were not. Because they were trying to stay undercover, and the developers were just like trolling everyone around, just making them more and more angry. But they were having a point that they will create a malware that will be undetectable for antiviruses, and the researchers will never do anything to that. Next slide, please. So sometime later in June, they even claimed that they were going private, because they had enough clients, enough customers who were paying and who knew how to use their bot properly. And so they said, no more new customers anymore, we're good, so go your way. Next slide, please. And yes, at that time, they were doing quite good. At this slide, you can see that according to our telemetry, the Cerberus bot was attacking users in various countries all over the world, mainly focusing in Europe. Next slide, please. But at some point, things changed really dramatically, because in the end of July, threat actor posted an advert offering all the Cerberus project, including the source code of the APK, admin panel, everything inside, everything related to the infrastructure, and even customer base with all the contacts and the active licenses. So it was like the whole business. They were trying to sell it on the auction, starting from $50,000, but they were ready to sell it for $100,000 without any bidding. And the specified reason was that they are selling it due to lack of time, the team was broken, and the main guy over there couldn't sit supports on the customers 24/7. And that was quite interesting. So there was like a really big, good like activity in terms of malicious activity. They were creating new versions. They were like refusing new customers, and then at some point they are broken. And everyone was interested in the next steps, what will happen. A lot of cyber criminals were afraid that all this data will be sold to some authorities, and they will understand who are behind these some cyber criminal activities in different countries. Some cyber criminals were afraid that their licenses will be burned. So all the people were just like monitoring the situation, and we were as well. Next slide, please. So soon after that, threat actor experienced more and more problems, and there were major problems with customers due to the fact that Play Protect enhanced the signatures to detect Cerberus inside the resources of the application, and that could be potentially solved. To be fair, because there is like proper client-specific encryption. You can do this client by client, but probably the author hadn't enough human resources or enough skills just to do that, and that was the problem. Next slide, please. So eventually the author decided to publish source code of the project for premium users of one of the most popular Russian-speaking underground forums. And based on the fact that, he couldn't handle with, probably he did that because he couldn't handle with his customers, with all the issues, he couldn't support that. He had some financial problems, and he decided to take an easy way out. Next slide, please. So he indeed published the source codes for the premium users, and we actually managed to find them as well, and we are currently still investigating them, and we are tracking all the activity which is going on around Cerberus as well. So, and you can say that that's the end. So it was like an empire. There was, they began when the previous empire got broken, and they had like really good times. And afterwards, there was something inside going on, and they couldn't support anything, and they got broken, and everything ended. But that's not the first time we are seeing that. And that's not the first when information is getting public. And the only outcome of these source codes getting publicly available is booming of cyber criminal activity. Next slide, please. So that's what we see right now in, for example, Russia. So as you can see, there is like a really big boom after the source codes got published. And this is a really beautiful picture I've shown you, but that's not actually relevant, to be fair, because before that, the group behind Cerberus was Russian speaking. And I think that the customers who were working with them, they were not allowed to work in Russia and post-Soviet Union territories because they were not actually willing to get more risks that they had. But the next slide, please. But this picture is way much better because in here you can see Europe. And in Europe, they were always aiming people in Europe and users in Europe. And on this picture, you can see that there was like a really big upcome of detections after they published the second version of Cerberus. And there was a peak, and at some point they started experiencing problems with support, with Play Protect, and there was like a really big fall. And then you can see another one raise. Just after August, or in August, when those source codes were published and everyone could find them. So What is the reason for that? The reason is that smaller cybercriminals who couldn't afford such licenses or couldn't get a license because developers were not willing to work with them, they couldn't find that. And now everyone has it, and everyone is starting to adopt that and use that. And that's the exact situation as we've seen with Anubis. The Anubis, the one that was just before Cerberus. So they're like duplicating the story with the source codes. So that's why we're trying to highlight this story and warn everyone that Cerberus is out. Cerberus is still there, and now it's even more dangerous. And I think that it's extremely useful and important for people to understand that there is like a whole world under the ground where people are really selling and buying this stuff, and that's really important to talk about that. Doesn't matter if we are talking about selling and buying private information, medical records, credit card information, or selling malware as a service. Next slide, please. So I have some bonus tracks for you on this slide, because before that, again, I was talking about functionality, about how they were trying to steal money, but I was not talking about 0 days or exploits or some exploitation vectors, nothing. And that's because the main scenario of infection is very, very simple, because it works like that. So users are installing some kind of application from somewhere, from some third-party market. They are granting minimal permissions to the application that can seem really innocent to them. And then afterwards, Cerberus is asking for permissions to use accessibility services, and it is doing it in a loop. So it shows the window again and again until you grant them or until you switch off your phone. And many users just grant them because they are not aware what's that. And even those who know, they might think that that's for a good reason, because as you can see from the description of accessibility service on the slide, it is created for people with disabilities could use phones. There is like speech to text or something like that. There is a loop, and it works really fine. And a lot of normal applications are using that to make those people feel comfortable. But actually, these kind of services are granting permissions to the application to read any kind of text which is present on the screen, including one-time passwords, to perform keylogging, to read touch events, to unlock the device. And Cerberus is actually using it to grant all the permissions it has to get to function properly, just clicking all the buttons instead of you. Google is fighting that, constantly fighting that, but there is a problem that they can do that in the official Play market, but not in the third-party markets, obviously, because they're not controlling anything like that. So next slide, please. And here we come to the tips and tricks. Next slide, please. Yeah. Next advice. So yeah, the first one is be alert, never believe, take your time to think, always doubt everything, check everything, never download or install applications from third-party markets, and just double check that you have deactivated the function to install applications from unknown sources. It will be like double check that nothing happens with you from installing some bad application. So never root your device even if you know what you are doing, because cybercriminals can abuse that, and that gives them more and more abilities in your phone. Install all the system applications and all the updates for the applications and system, because obviously there are a lot of patches, also security patches, and that's very important. And last, but obviously not the least, it is using a security solution on any of your devices, even mobile devices, such as Kaspersky Security Cloud. And I really recommend you to use that because it is easy to use, but protects you from almost all the threats that is there in the wild. Next slide, please. Thanks a lot. Sorry for connectivity issues and for the sun that is shining on my face all the way around. I hope that you liked the presentation. If you got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. So let's talk.
Thank you, Dmitry. Unfortunately, the two things we can't control are the sun and the internet.
Yeah, it's the sun and the connectivity.
I want to say thank you for that, but I don't know who among you also sort of started looking sideways at their Android phone when they saw that growth chart of Cerberus. Now the source has been released into the wild. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. This is from Achim, who is Bayerischer Rundfunk. Is the publication. Mm-hmm. How do banking Trojans for Android spread? In the PC area, we saw useful software infected by viruses and driven by downloads. How do Trojans infect smartphones?
Well, there are a couple of ways to do that. So the first one is, as I said, it is third-party markets. When you can get any kind of application, Trojanize it and upload it to this third-party market, and then users get it, and that's it, the end of the story. Sometimes we're seeing scenarios when at first legitimate applications are uploaded to some Google Play market, and it actually happens that sometime later they're including the dropper functionality and using this dropper functionality actually to download and to drop malware. It happens. Sometimes cyber criminals are using phishing emails, phishing short messages, messengers, social networks. So they are trying to spread it anyhow. Mainly the scenarios are almost the same than comparing to PC, but there are just different small things that we're talking all the way, like third-party markets.
Is there anything that's, business, industry, or, even just people sort of talking with each other? Is there anything that we can do to better prepare people for the risks that are involved with using technology platforms, especially when it comes to things like Cerberus, and it's such a sensitive area, our personal finances? How can we better prepare the world not to fall victim to these?
Well, that's a really good question because security awareness is one of the fundamental things that we should do right now. And we in Kaspersky are trying to do that the best way that we can. We're always talking about security, trying to tell people about underground worlds and forums, about new malware, about new phishing, about any scams that we know. But this is good that I'm talking with you now and I say some interesting stuff and you are getting more and more awareness. But I think that there should be more systematical approach to this question. For example, employers and companies should regularly do some security awareness trainings for their employees, because it's not even the question of their own security, but that's the question of the company's security. Right now, we are living in the pandemic time, and we are seeing a lot of issues, for example, with remote working. And those employees who are going home and trying to work remotely, they are just not ready for that. They don't know what's firewall, how to set up network at home, how to update your antivirus bases, nothing. Probably, if we are living in the time when technology is penetrating everything, we should have more educational stuff for kids and for students, because they will live in the world like that. They will have more and more technology, and if they are knowing how to use it properly and safely, securely from childhood, that's cool. That's what I think.
Perfect. Dmitry, thank you so much. If we didn't get to your question, don't worry. We will get Dmitry to answer you offline. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Dmitry. Everybody, thank you. And so, as we move to the final part of today's event, please join me in welcoming two new speakers to the virtual sofa. We have Yuri Namestnikov, who is Director of Global Research and Analysis, Russia for Kaspersky, and he is joined today by Lisa Forte, who is founder of Red Goat Cybersecurity, who also co-founded Cyber Volunteers 19. Now, CV19 is a volunteer organisation set up to provide cyber support for those in need and set up following the global outbreak of COVID-19. Now, we won't have time for Q&A at the end of this session, unfortunately, but we will do our best to answer any written questions submitted in the chat after the event. So please do keep your questions coming. Just use the chat function and make sure you've requested a one-on-one interview with our speakers via your PR contacts if you would like one. So now I would like to introduce you a little more formally. Lisa, please, could you introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, my name is Lisa Forte and I'm a partner at Red Goat Cybersecurity, and I am one of the 3 co-founders of Cyber Volunteers 19, which is a volunteer organisation helping healthcare providers in Europe.
Perfect, thank you so much. And Yuri, please, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yuri Namestnikov, and I'm helping people to solve cybersecurity issues for the last 10 years. So my daily job is to detect malware and dig out interesting cases. And we try to help other people to solve all these tough times related to cyber management and COVID-19.
Indeed, and so many more, as we've heard from a few of our speakers already today, so many more risk vectors to take into consideration. So, Yuri, I'm going to hand over to you now for your conversation with Lisa.
Thank you, Kate. So actually, it is an unusual year, isn't it? Because when in late 2019, me and Dmitry Galov, who you've heard just a couple of minutes ago, predicted in Kaspersky Security Bulletin that there will be a huge surge in number of attacks on healthcare facilities and devices. Unfortunately, I had no idea that we will be such accurate about this prediction. Yeah, in general, it's good to have an idea of emerging threats, but in this one, I really wish I would be wrong. And regarding COVID-19, it really triggered a huge number of attacks from cyber criminals, because all of them tried to leverage the situation, because A, quarantine and everyone goes online, everything goes online, and B, actually many organizations were not prepared for that at all. And today I'm happy because I'm joined with by cybersecurity expert Lisa Forte, and she's a founder of a very interesting organization called Cyber Volunteers 19, and we will talk a bit deeper about the issue that they help to handle and her proactive role in taking it. So, Lisa, welcome, and thank you for joining to discuss this with me. So could you please tell a bit more about the situation and how you come to an idea to create such an interesting organization?
Yes, it is a bit, as everyone in the world probably experienced, all of a sudden we were in this pandemic. And it sort of felt a little bit like it came out of nowhere. Certainly in Europe, it felt like it came out of nowhere. And essentially, there was 3 of us. And we started chatting on Twitter. And we sort of said, you know, we need to be really careful here because the hospitals may very well be under a lot of strain. And when they're under a lot of strain, people make mistakes. They also don't have the opportunity to have, you know, systems down when you're maxed out with patients. That can't happen. And we sort of said, well, maybe we should offer some help and some services free of charge just to sort of help protect them. So it started off just 3 of us. And I think one thing we never realized was how many people wanted to volunteer, because within a couple of weeks, we were thousands of people. It wasn't just 3 people. So the response was just phenomenal.
That sounds great, because when cybersecurity professionals can come together and try to solve some issues, it really can help the whole community to stay protected and save more lives. Because as you mentioned, these organizations have some more important things to do than to handle cybersecurity. So during your in your organization, what are the main things that you with which healthcare organizations are approaching you and asking for help?
So we did a number of things. One of the main things that we decided really early on was that our focus was going to be helping hospitals and healthcare providers across Europe, so not sort of just EU countries, across Europe. And what we wanted to do was make sure that across the board, they were more secure and they were better defended. So we looked at what elements this needed to include. So we had a team that provided intelligence reports, weekly or daily, sometimes intelligence reports into hospitals. We had an awareness team that produced amazing awareness raising materials for their staff so that they could have free cybersecurity awareness during this time. We provided instant response advice. We provided sort of on-demand advice and guidance on different things that were happening. So we kind of broke it down into lots of different things. The big challenge actually was that we had so many volunteers, and very quickly managing the applications that were coming in to the platform was a full-time job in itself. So we then had to start recruiting people to help manage the volunteers. So it got big very fast.
This is unpredictable, honestly speaking. But great to hear that you solved this issue. So this is great. And actually, when we did our research about how often healthcare organizations are getting attacked by cybercriminals, like there are places in the world, not only in Europe, where hospitals get digitalized and they suddenly just get connected to the internet with no cybersecurity. For example, in Latin America, there are countries, and in the APEC region, there are countries where more than 50% of devices in the medical networks get at least once attacked during the year. So half of the devices of the network. It's incredible. In Europe, situation is better, and I expect that it's it was the lessons learned from WannaCry story, because it was the first story when the issues with healthcare sector was really highlighted, because it was visible. How do you think, Lisa? Did hospitals really learn something after WannaCry, and will they learn something new after the COVID?
I think
we are talking about cybersecurity, not healthcare.
I think the cybersecurity industry learned a lot from WannaCry, because I think there was a belief that perhaps hackers would leave healthcare alone and they wouldn't go after hospitals because it would be sort of unconscionable, it would be bad, it wouldn't be very moral. And I think what WannaCry showed us was that rule does not apply. They will go after hospitals. So I think it really showed us that actually, okay, whoa, we need to make sure these hospitals are secure. And I think with COVID, one of the things we realized with cyber volunteers was that the funding to some of these hospitals has been so bad for so many years that some of them have an IT team that's 2 people. That's it. 2 people for the whole hospital and all the data and all the patients and all the systems. And that's not workable. That doesn't work. So I think one thing that we're going to write up a big post report of cyber volunteers and what we learned And I think one of the things is that actually funding for cybersecurity from government level across all these countries needs to go up, because you cannot do cybersecurity with no manpower and no money. It just doesn't work.
So do you understand correctly that the main issue why such important critical facilities has only two IT guys managing everything is funding? Or there is also lack of people?
Yeah, I think
so.
Funding was the big thing. Yeah, and I think these two people have to manage the IT, which is separate from cybersecurity, which is a different issue entirely. So if you have to manage both things, that's not really good enough. And I think the other problem that we saw, which is quite interesting, was that a lot of the doctors in the hospitals actually got furloughed. So they were actually sent home. And the consultants in the UK and France and other countries wanted to keep seeing their patients, but they were sent home and they didn't get any guidance on how to do this. So they decided that the best way to see their patients was to set up a Zoom call. And then they were uploading the patient data to their Google Docs or Dropbox accounts and sending the test results by a Dropbox link or a Google Docs link. And to them, they thought this was fine. But one incident, a doctor uploaded 3 separate patient files to Google Docs and accidentally shared the link to the overall folder to the patients, which of course meant that all the patients inside that folder could access each other's test results. So we saw a lot of that happening. And I think one big concern is, where is the data now? Where is all this hospital data? It could be in Google, it could be in Dropbox, it could be in Hotmail, it could be in Yahoo, it could be anywhere. It could be all over the place. And I think that's one thing that COVID-19 pandemic caused a big issue, not just in healthcare, across the board, was data just went everywhere.
Yeah, it sounds a bit dangerous because me personally, I don't want everyone to read my test results. I don't it should be some personal life. Actually, we did another research on this thing, including what kind of security, like the level of security of specialized healthcare systems, including the ones that are collecting DCOM images, and where all your Röntgen and all other interesting photos are stored. And remember that a year ago we just stopped upon one of the system that you can connect to the system from your random IP address, and it asks to authorize. And unfortunately, there is no field to type in your username or password. There is only OK button. So you press the OK button and you are in. So this is the level of current security in some cases, and I think it's important to really fill the gap and invest a bit in cybersecurity, because if we'll have a baseline for such important organizations, the attacks on them will become much more harder and more expensive for cyber criminals, because right now they don't need to invest anything to attack a hospital. So this is also something to keep in mind. After WannaCry, I remember that it was 30% of 10% drop in 2 years, 10% points drop in 2 years in the number of attack devices in healthcare organizations. But still, this number is very high, and we still have a place to improve, especially with such cases when, as Lisa mentioned, when data goes to Dropbox or just shared via links. And cybersecurity guys have to provide plans how to, like, all these organizations are quite similar. And actually, you can build a framework for everyone to, with suggestions how to build proper cybersecurity. As I said, like, baseline can, I think, be a barrier for many cyber criminals, because they need to invest money and they don't like it.
And I think the other thing is that, it's very easy to blame the doctors and say, well, why would they upload that? That's so stupid. Why would they do that? That's terrible, right? It's very easy to blame them, but they're not cybersecurity professionals. So what should have happened is the hospital should have said, under no circumstances, upload this to any account. This is how you're going to do your job. We will make that work. And they didn't do that. And so the doctors think, well, I upload my photos to Google Docs and I upload my passport, so why can't I upload these other things? So I think cybersecurity professionals, we really need to see ourselves as people who facilitate you to do your job securely.
Absolutely. And actually, I remember we did a survey last year for US and Canada among doctors, and like 30% of respondents said that they had no any cybersecurity training. So there is no plan to teach them. And as you said, security awareness is really important, because people, they have their own job. Their job is to save people's life, not to like manage cybersecurity. They should know something,
right?
Like basic things, and that's it. And keep saving life. So do you have any good examples of like success stories for this year from your perspective?
Yeah, so we had some really great success stories with our intelligence briefing, which ended up going out in almost every European language. So we had translators who would translate the intelligence report from English into Russian and French and German and Greek and all these different languages. So it was a huge logistical nightmare every week. And that was an amazing achievement because the reach was enormous. We also had our awareness campaign, which was received really well by the certs of each country and actually promoted by a lot of them as well internally in that country, which was an amazing achievement. And the whole movement caught on so quickly that we actually ended up forming sister groups in Australia, Dubai, Brazil, and the United States. So it was an amazing movement across the world that I was surprised how fast it grew, which was it was amazing.
Wow. Actually, localizing such threat intel data is super important, absolutely, because we know that not everyone speaks English so well, and this is technical data, and you need to handle it somehow. So this is a great opportunity for different countries to improve their security level. Yeah, this is good. Regarding the risks, what do you think? Is it personal data that cyber criminals are looking for? Personal data of patients, or it's data of healthcare institutions or producers or pharmaceutical producers? What is more lucrative for them?
So we saw a number of different things happen, actually. At the beginning, it was very much sort of a ransomware type situation where they just wanted to cause issues and ransom the hospitals at a critical time. That then quickly evolved, and suddenly what we started seeing was slightly more sophisticated World Health Organization scams, where essentially there was lots of phishing emails purporting to give updates to nurses and doctors in the hospital. Then that evolved again, and when the hospitals started needing to buy PPE, protective equipment, We then started seeing fake companies getting set up to sell a lot of this equipment to the hospitals. Sometimes, we had a few hospitals who spent over 100,000 euros for nothing because nothing existed and no due diligence was done. So then we saw that sort of stage of it. And then finally, as we moved into more vaccine-related research, we started to see more sophisticated attacks targeting labs and targeting areas that might have more sensitive data that wasn't personal data, but was very valuable.
Sure. Actually, it correlates with our research. As we've seen that actually personal data is valuable on darknet markets because people can be blackmailed, and criminals understand how to use it. And regarding targeted attacks on different pharmaceutical producers, this is actually not the first year when we spot such attacks. There are several groups that are performing, specializing on such kind of attacks, because pharmaceutical industry is money, and to produce something serious, you need a lot of investments, and when you can steal something and just skip this research thingy, then it's effective from an economical perspective, but for the company who is actually investing in this, then and not getting money back, they will not be able to produce next pharmaceutical vaccine or something else. So to me, it sounds like it's really important to protect such companies as well. But they have money, at least.
Yes, exactly. And we were also seeing that it was, initially we thought, okay, well, we need to protect the hospitals. And then we realized that actually we need to protect the entire supply chain of the hospital, because if the hospital can't get ventilators because your ventilator manufacturer has been attacked with ransomware, then the knock-on effect of that is the hospital doesn't have the ventilators. So it becomes quite a big task quite quickly when you start looking at how critical that supply chain is.
This is this is kind of things that you start to think only when you face such threats. So I think we should start to conclude our talk, and maybe main three takeaways from your side, Lisa, for hospitals, how they should protect them, better protect them.
I would say that the critical thing to do is know where your data is, so you know where you have to protect. Make sure your staff are well trained and have a really good plan for what happens if you have a data breach. And I think one of the main things I'd just like to conclude with is that actually the cyber volunteers movement showed me the number of people in information security who are willing to give up time with their families and volunteer to help the doctors and nurses. And I think that's absolutely inspiring.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And from my side, I would also like to add two more points. Point A is to better have a plan before something bad is happening. So actually sitting with a pen and paper it takes time, but then it saves days and even months in recovery, and it can save a huge budget. And in case of healthcare, it can save more lives. And second thing is it's an evolving process. Cybersecurity is an evolving process. You just cannot say, okay, after the pandemics, we should invest something into technologies. No, this doesn't work like this. It's an evolving process. So you constantly need to improve your cybersecurity. And actually, there are a lot of ready-to-use technologies. Just you need to spend some time, understand what you need, and as I said, have a baseline of protection will increase the attack cost on you, and then it will be game over for cyber criminals, for example, for ransomware, because they are, in many cases, really afraid of even simple antiviruses installed, and they try to avoid such machines. Thank you. I think it was a great talk. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
And I'm handing back to Kate.
Yes, thank you both so much. An absolutely fascinating discussion it was. I have a feeling, tying the whole event together, maybe the first compulsory human augmentation would be instilling a sense of ethics and morality into the people who would hack the health system. Would you agree, Lisa?
Good luck with that. Hopefully that will work, but good luck.
Well, listen, thank you so much, both of you. And Lisa, I think I can confidently speak on behalf of everybody watching when I say thank you so much for the time and the idea that you had for the Cyber Volunteers movement throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. So thank you so much, both of you. Well, that was indeed an eye-opening and perhaps eye-watering glimpse at the front line of the cybersecurity battle surrounding COVID-19. And again, thank you so much to both of our speakers. Sadly, that brings us to the end of 2020 edition of Kaspersky Next. We have certainly covered a lot of interesting topics, and there is a lot of food for thought there. I'm sure you have questions. A massive thanks to all of our speakers and to you, our audience, for attending. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and hopefully we have managed to answer the majority of your questions as we've gone along. But if you do have more, don't worry, we'll be delighted to hear from you. Just send them in. You can submit them via the chat or pose them via your PR contacts. And of course, you can make sure you take the opportunity to request an interview with our speakers and ask them yourself. Why not? We're about to share with you now a QR code where you can download our press packs. So make sure you scan that. Thank you so much for having me. Goodbye.